Thank everybody for joining us today on our second presentation of our Launch and Learn. It's noon, so we're gonna wait a couple of minutes to allow other participants to join us. Okay, just a couple of minutes. We'll start shortly. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome for joining us on this, our second presentation of a series of webinars that we call Launch and Learn. It's 12:01. Please, let's give another minute before we start. Let's give another minute to wait for any additional when they want to join us. Just give us a couple minutes. Thank you. And with that, we're just gonna get going. It's 12:02. Respect of your time. I know it's lunchtime, and I want to thank you one more time for joining us in this, once again, our second presentation of a series of webinars that we call Launch and Learn. The series have been are current in terms of topics, very relevant, and very diverse in nature. I just want to share with you also that this series of webinars have been put together in partnership with CAMACOL, the Latin Chamber of Commerce of Miami, and the FIU Continuing Education Office. All webinars will take place on Thursdays between noon and 1 o'clock. My name is Jorge Sumaeta. I'm the Senior Director of Academic Planning and Accountability, Continuing Education, and Dual Enrollment at FIU. I have a few housekeeping notes that I want to share with you before we start. One, that the webinar is being recorded. Two, that all microphones have been muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the tool at the bottom of the screen, the Q&A tool, to ask your questions, and all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. I also want to remind you, please, that after you log off from Zoom and you see the two hands, determining whether indicating that it's a good or bad in terms of the technology. I'm talking about the Zoom technology. There will be a survey that will pop up and will address specifically the presentation. Please do not forget to complete this survey because it's very important to us. Okay. With that said, I wanted to share with you that we have a extremely interesting presentation for any business owner or for anybody that would like to explore new strategies to grow not only locally but internationally. The series, today's workshop webinar is called World Bank Doing Business Indicators and the importance of this for business and investment decisions. Very interesting. Last semester, I had the opportunity to bring to my class, to one of my classes, Mr. Pedro Sos. Mr. Pedro Sos give the very same presentation that you're going to be seeing in a few minutes. And I had to tell you that the students were not only delighted, but they were hooked to the last minute of the presentation. And there were many excellent questions about this topic. How do we use different indicators, especially now we just embarking in what is called the fourth industrial revolution right after the third, which was the information revolution. When we see that, is how do we use all this intensive collection of data that is being performed as we speak and develop different indicators. The World Bank approached this very same topic in a different manner, and they have developed this series. And I'm so glad to have Pedro Sos, who's going to be the presenter, uh, uh, focusing and sharing this information with you because I truly believe there's a series of indicators that you have to be focusing on in order to be successful in tomorrow's business. I want to say that Pedro Sos has over 20 years of experience in information technology, management information, system integration, financial solutions for e-governments, as well as e-commerce applications, including single windows and one-stop shops. See, you can see that his work in terms relates very closely to this, the development and the practicality of these indicators, and that's highly welcome. And you're gonna hear from him from the perspective, and you will be developing an interest from the perspective that you'll be able to use these indicators to once again develop strategies for investment and locally and internationally. Mr. Peter Sauce is a general manager with IOSSoft. He's affiliate, which is an affiliate of IOS Partners, and he oversees the information communication and technology for development and e-commerce practices. He holds a master's in computer science, an engineer diploma from the Institut François du Petrol, see my French, and a bachelor's in business administration, and he is certified in ISO 9001, and he will tell us what that 9000 ISO 9001. I tell you that I couldn't think of a better person to bring to this series that Mr. Pedro Sos, because I have seen him in action in the classroom, and I see the interest that was developed by the students, one, and two, uh, as a current topic, as we're going through this crisis and trying to understand the market and trying to determine how to develop better practice on one side and strategies for the future. With that, let me bring Mr. Pedro Sos to the screen. Pedro?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sumaet. I appreciate the words. And good afternoon to everybody. Thank for your time and special thanks to our friends from Camacol and Continued Education from Florida International University. I hope that everybody is doing well, mostly in health, because this is probably the most challenging times that we have been confronting, at least that I have been seeing for the last decades in my life. Saying that, the topic today will be the World Bank doing business indicators and the impact on business and investment decisions. I will start now going to the presentation. Let me start moving. Okay. Once again, my name is Pedro Sus. I'm the general manager of IOSSoft Inc., which is an affiliate of EOS Partners. EOS Partners is a minority-owned firm. It was incorporated in 1999, 21 years ago, and the main business of EOS Partner is economic development and financial advisory. Also, we specialize in the issue of private partnerships, PPPs, and also deal a lot with privatization of infrastructure, airport, airlines, and so on. IOSSoft was created in 2005 as an affiliate of IOS Partner, mostly focused in what you call information for communication technology, ICT for development. Our main business comes from the bilateral donors. These are USAID, World Bank, African Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank. And we specialize in provide technical solutions and other type of solutions to countries that are following up what they call the World Bank doing business indicator. Our current portfolio of business is around 40 projects for 2020. They're almost all of them international. We have some projects in the United States, but mostly they're in the Middle East, Central America, the Caribbean, and also very intensive presence in the continent of Africa. The objectives of the next 40 minutes is really to understand what are the World Bank doing business indicators, what is the methodology that they use, why is so important to understand, and then we will bring some cases that will give the opportunity to relate some of these concepts to the real life and how countries really apply these indicators into their daily life. This is very important to mention that in the next 40 minutes, this is just a general knowledge of what these indicators are. It's not really a deep analysis or discussion. It's just to be able for you to get that general knowledge and for you to know what are the sources of information if you're interested to continue increasing your knowledge in these indicators. Let's start to define and understand what is an economic indicator. Well, an economic indicator is an statistical data about an economic activity which allow analysis and economic performance predictions about a country. We are all familiar with this about these economic indicators. For example, you have the GDP, gross domestic product, you have M2, which is the money supply, that's the amount of cash available in the market of a country, consumer price index, producer price index, and one that is we are used a lot here in the United States and mostly the retail industry use it, which is the consumer confidence survey. Another one that we all familiar in a monthly basis is the employment statistics, and there's other ones, retail trade sales and so on. In addition to these economic indicators, there's other indicators that being used to measure activities in the country, but they are not related with economical data. Example, you have a corruption perception index, CPI, that is measure the transparency and how accountable is a country in the aspect of their management. Then, what are the World Bank doing business indicators? Well, I probably want to answer the question in another way. The World Bank doing business indicator, they are not an economic indicator. Even though that they have this last name indicator, they are not an economic indicator. They don't keep pulse of the economy, and they are not a vital economic indicator. Do not directly measure the general conditions such quality infrastructure, inflation, amount of level of economic activity, crime, unemployment. In other words, the World Bank doing business indicators just measure how easy for an investor is to do business into a country. That's the purpose of these indicators. Then the correct name is the World Bank is doing business indicators. They born from the need to quantify which countries has a better business environment. And that's what the World Bank use in an annual basis to measure the progress and how open these countries are being to do business. They are a comprehensive quantitative method used to analyze data that provide the basic understanding of the regulatory and environmental framework in a country. Every year, the World Bank aims to measure the cost of doing business of 190 countries. Very important. Their base to measure in an annual basis is 190 countries. This means that they will, in an annual basis, they visit these countries, they gather data, they survey around 12,500 experts, and they collect that data going through their methodology and produce what you call the World Bank doing business indicator for a year. When I talk about experts and the people that they contribute stakeholders, most are interviews with lawyers, accountants, regulators, exporters, importers, and anyone that is involved in the investment promotion and investment activity into a country. The indicators measure mostly the processing time, government requirement, and the cost of doing business in that specific country. The Doing Business report is elaborated by the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation, and it's an annual report that is available in public domain for anyone that wants to follow up this indicator. Let's see what World Bank measure with these indicators. Let's think about that you are an investor and you want to start doing business in a country. Well, they focus in 5 activities that are the 5 activities that they want to target to improve. The World Bank would like to improve those activities to facilitate investors to do business in that country. Example, they focus in starting a business, how easy it is for an investor to start a business. They also focus in the area of getting a location. If there's facilities and it's easy for you to start a physical presence in the country. They measure the assessing of finance, what type of finance and what type of tools and vehicles are there for you to get some liquidity and some finance in your business. They measure also the dealing of the day-to-day operation. How easy for an investor to dealing with the day-to-day operation. And then finally, they also focus in the area of operating in a secure environment. How secure is your investment? What are the tools and the legal mechanism available for you to protect you as an investor? As you see inside these 5 areas, you have what they call the doing business indicators. We will go a little deeper, but these are mostly the cycle that measure the World Bank doing do business indicators. At the top, you see the 5 areas that I mentioned, and under you have the indicators that are going to be measured in an annual basis, and we'll go give you the rank that we will look in and see how the countries are progressing. In opening a business, start the indicators starting a business, which means that how easy for me as an investor, I can register, I can make my company legally in the country, and how flexible is for me to be able to open a business in that country. Also, under getting location, you have dealing with construction permits, getting electricity. How easy is to have my physical presence in that country? What will be the time for me to have a location, and how will be the time to get electricity? Probably some of us think that getting electricity is a simple thing, but in some countries it's a very demanding process and a very long and expensive process. Under those, you have also assessing of finance, will be registered property, the investor, how easy he can register a property, how easy he can get credit through other vehicles, through collaterals and so on, and what will be the protection that I have for my minority investors. In the day-to-day operation, they measure 3 indicators, but this one, the last one contracted with the government, is an indicator that will be available next year. Currently, they are not measuring that one. But the other 2 are very interesting. One is paying taxes, which is something that any investor would like to know. What will be my tax obligation? They want to have something transparent, how much will be, and how easy I can pay those taxes. And then you have trading across border. This indicator had been taking a lot of attention to everybody because this measure how easy it is to import and export goods into a country. That doesn't affect only the manufacturing or the new investor, but also any person or any business that in production is interested to know how easy I can import goods into the country and how easy I can export. In other words, if I'm a manufacturing, starting a business in a country, I would like to see how easy the raw material will come into my factory, because I need to know how fast I can produce a product. And then not only that, once I produce the product, how easy I can export the product and get it to the global market. Another one is the operating securing a business environment. Is you as an investor would like to know what are the legal remedy and what are the enforcement that will be in your contracts, in your obligations with other partners, and so on. They also measure that and they follow that very well. And the final one, which is resolving insolvency, which is the issue, what are the mechanisms and the tools available for me to deal with a restructuring of my business and even bankruptcies and so on. As you see, the 5 areas in the top, each of the areas have 1 or 3 indicators, and these are the indicators that they're going to be measured in an annual basis. What is the methodology that the World Bank used? Well, let's better to go in the deep theoretical things. This is something that we can later explore into more deep with the information that the World Bank provide. Let's visualize how these indicators are being presented to the public. In other words, when you go and you visit the website of the World Bank, you will find this chart, this dashboard. In this dashboard, you can see that you have in your, oh, sorry. Okay. You have in your, sorry, I need to move this. Okay. Thank you. You have the indicators of the country, each of them, the 11 indicators. What is the current position and rank of those indicators? Always think about it that they will be showing you the year, the current year, that for the indicators and the World Bank is 2020. I'm taking the example of Brunei. This is one of our clients. And you see that the 11 indicators have been ranked individually, but also at the right side, you can see that they rank the country overall. They said that what is your position in the ranking of the country? In other words, lower the number of the indicator, better position you are in that indicator. And this will go from number 1 to 190. And the same thing happened when they rank your country. They will go from 1 to 90. They also rank what they call the Doing Business Indicator score. They have a methodology for that. And mostly this score is like if you relate it to an individual, your credit report or your credit score uh, has an individual. Then also they score the country in that aspect. These are the indicators that I mentioned that the World Bank go in an annual basis, visit 190 countries and gather information regarding these indicators and then position and rank yourself inside the indicators and also as a country. The description of the doing business indicators in general are very well detailed. We will go over that through the website of the World Bank, but they measure procedures, time, and cost. Mostly all the indicators measure that, measure how many procedures require, how many steps require to start a business, how many steps require to register your company, the time, if you can do that in days or it will take months, and the cost. They measure all this in a process manner, and they go that. Some of the other indicators, they just measure the impact in the legal framework, and they also rank them in accordance to that. Let me do one stop here. I'm going to visit the website of the World Bank. Okay, if Ari allow me. Okay. The World Bank has a website called doingbusiness.org. This is a very good website. Have plenty of information. You can deeply go through the methodologies that they use to do this calculation. It's very transparency and there is a lot of accountability in them. You can see here in the dashboard, they rank the countries by economy, by different indicators and so on. Let's take an example. Let's go to a country and there you can visualize exactly what I told you, that I showed you in the previous slide, where they rank the different indicators inside the country. Then I encourage you to visit this website. I encourage you to read about that, and this would really expand a lot of the information that I'm providing you right now. Let's go back to our presentation. Just a moment. Like I said, those methodologies, those processes are well defined there, but you see here, like I mentioned, the majority of them measure procedure, time, and costs, because that's what you're looking. How can you improve from one year to another and make those processes more simple for your future investors? Why they are important to understand? Well, first of all, it's very important for the World Bank because this is one of the factors that they use and conditions that they use for lending money to recipients of the World Bank. In other words, they trace in an annual basis how is the progress of this country, and in accordance with that, that's the type of loans and the interest and the conditions that the lending process will have between the bank and the country. Okay. Also, it's important for your for knowledge of the world economy. You as a decision maker need to know how you do business in other places. It's part of your general knowledge, and it's part of living in a globalized world. Moreover, you probably will think, well, I only do business in my little town or my state, but these days are not this way. You are doing business in your own place, but you also have a relation with other countries. You have a relation with other manufactures it, and so on and so on. You buy raw material from some other outside the United States. You need to understand what are the conditions to buy a material from another country. Also, if you're interested to expand your market, probably you want to explore a little more how easy it is to go and do business in that country. Then it's important of knowledge of the world economy. You need to have this type of information available for you and know where is the source of information. Another one is doing business a major force for institutional development. When I talk about institutional development, is the countries now are using these indicators to produce their blueprint and to produce, the major activities that will help them to start improving the institutional services. I think that for me, the example more dramatic in that is Rwanda. Rwanda currently, in 2018, they start a very aggressive reform. Rwanda, in few years, were able to make a lot of reforms, reducing the time in permits of construction, reducing the time to get in electricity permits, eliminating delays, and also helping importers and exporters. Using the doing business indicators as an institutional plan, they were able to improve the quality of living in their country. They were able to not only to provide better service to the investors, but also better service to their citizens. Rwanda is a growing economy in Africa, have a very strong middle class, and also have a very good future in many aspects of continue growing. And probably you say, well, what is the big deal? Yes, it's a big deal because you have to think about in the historical context. This country in the 90s were in a genocide situation where millions of people were killed. And that brought the country to a level of poverty and desperation incredible. Then using the doing business indicators as a blueprint, they in few years were able to turn around their economy and bring them to a vibrant and very good economy for themselves. Finally, the doing business indicators compile a lot of data, a lot of information that have a lot of value for other research that you're doing. This information is public domain. It's there available and you can download it in books, or you can download it as raw data and so on. Then it's a very good source of information when you're trying to do other type of research. Like any methodology and like any framework, there's challenges, there's constraints, there are things to be improved, okay? I'm not saying that these indicators are perfect, but at least these indicators give a framework to measure and evaluate countries in an annual basis. But the challenges are a lot in these indicators. One challenge is sudden changes in economy of the countries are not reflected. This means issues like the one that we are living right now, issues of a worldwide recession, the impact of this virus in the individual economies and the world economy are not reflected in these indicators. These indicators will not be able to tell you what was the impact, how much unemployment will be generated from this situation, or what are the issues of liquidity, or what is the devaluation of your currency. These indicators always will measure how easy it is for an investor to start a business in that country. Another one that had been very strong criticized is the issue of potential think tank by the political motivation of the country and the participant. There had been a lot of incorrect perception of use of these indicators by countries to give the perception that the country is really open for business and he really had been moving forward to be a more free trade situation with them. But it's not. They use one indicator or two to show that when the reality is not that. Then this issue had been a very strong criticized to the World Bank and the doing business indicators. Another thing is that doesn't reflect the social economic situation of your country. And one that is very important, it doesn't measure the impact of the great economy. The great economy is a very crucial issue in emerging economies. Is that economy that live in the shadow, that no one know them, that generate income but doesn't register, it doesn't pay taxes, it doesn't follow frameworks of labors and so on. Even though that the doing business indicators doesn't measure the impact of the great economy, which is true, but had been an indirect vehicle to improve and reduce the great economy. How? Well, one of the big complaints that the people that are in the great economy have is that to register a business take a long time, is very expensive, the government requires too much documents, and then it's better to be in the great economy to go and deal with this situation. One of the indicators that the World Bank measures is starting a business. And when the country is trying to improve that indicator, when the country reduces the time and the cost to register a company, it's facilitating for industries that are in the great economy to move out of that great economy. And in a way, it doesn't measure, but also help to promote that in that aspect. Another criticism is that the indicators, some of them are at the national economy level and the other one at the regional level. We will see some examples like the construction permits. In some countries, the registration of a construction permit is not at the national level. It's at the state or at the municipal level. And even though in other countries, yes, it's at the national level. Then that's a discrepancy there that we will see when we study the cases in a few minutes, and we saw. Another strong criticism was the frequency methodology change, which really create a disturbance when you are trying to follow up a tendency in these indicators by country. Now, let's take a few examples of countries. Let's take some of the important points that we discussed, and let's try to relate it with the principles and the items that we learned before. Once again, let's go to our friends. This is one of our clients, the Kingdom of Brunei. Is an oil and gas producer. And we were hired to help them to improve one indicator, the getting credit indicator. The reason is that they want to start diversifying their economy, not only to rely in one good, which is gas and oil. Then they hired us. We went there, and for the last 5 years, we have been intensively working with them. And I proudly can say that for the last 3 years, they had been in position number 1 in this indicator. What is important here is, and you will see that in other cases, is that Why a country that is oil producer, gas producer, that is not a recipient of the World Bank, in other words, it doesn't borrow money from the World Bank, is worried about these indicators. Why these countries are thinking about that these indicators are important to reflect something. What they want to reflect is that their country is open for business, and also that their country really is diversified. They want to start diversifying their economy because, like right now, when you depend only from oil and gas, you really are in big trouble, you see, because the price of oil and gas, I don't remember how much was yesterday, but it's really very low. Then saying that, you can see that this improvement of indicators and making your country more available for business is not only for emerging economies. It's not only a relation that the World Bank will have with the countries that they lend money. It's a factor that is coming more and more important for other economies. Another case is New Zealand. When you think about which one is the doing business ranking number one in the world, well, you would think that it's Germany or United States or Canada or some of these, big economic powers. Well, it's not United States, not Germany, it's not Canada, it's New Zealand. Overall, they're number one, and you can see by the indicators that they had been in a very high rank in all their indicators. Moreover, the score as a country is very high, and you see that many of them are number one, two, and so on. New Zealand is a very different case. They have these improved rankings, not because they were thinking about the doing business indicators. It's because 10 years ago, they launched these huge reforms to improve the services to their citizens. They want to make easy to start a business in their country. They were not thinking about investors. They were thinking about their own citizens. They want to accelerate getting a construction permit. They want to deal with the issue of registering a property and so on. As consequence, when the doing business indicators start getting more and more familiar, you can see that they came in the top because they start this reform 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Then it's a very interesting case because in a way show you that when you improve these indicators, you're also improving the services of your citizens. It's not only for investors, it's not only for foreign investors. It's also for the day-to-day operation and how effective you are to the service of your citizens. Let's go back to, let's see, the United States. Very interesting case in that aspect. We are not number one, number two, we are number 6, okay? And in some of these indicators, we are doing well, but like I mentioned, these indicators sometimes there's a discrepancy between national and federal level and state and municipal level. Example, when you dealing with construction permits in the United States, you don't deal with the federal government, you deal with your state, and moreover, you're dealing with your municipality or your county. Those are the ones that give you those permits. Those are the ones that generate those permits for you. Then probably this number is showing some reality, but it doesn't show the reality for the 50 states and the territories and so on. Then starting a business, very important. To starting a business, the registration of your business has several levels, having the municipality level for the patents and also the registration of your company that go probably at the state level. Then, even though that show a good ranking, doesn't mean that is the reality for all the nation overall. But you have other ones like resolving insolvency. Like everybody know, the issue of insolvency in the United States managed at the federal level. When you are restructuring your business under the bankruptcy law, you go to the federal level. This is nothing that is related with the state or municipal level. Then also you have the issue of trading crossing borders, which dealing with import and export. We have really a very combined issues of poor communities, private enterprises, and so on. But so far, when you take an example, you can say that, it's easy to import and export products into the United States. Another interesting case, and I want to divide it in two: China, Hong Kong, and then mainland China. Hong Kong is a territory of China. It became part of China a few years ago, but maintains certain independence from China mainland. What you see here, very interesting, that they're number 3 overall in the world. And you can see that many of the indicators that are being surveyed on an annual basis show you a very high rank. Example, dealing with construction permits. I'm assuming that have to be very important for them because they don't have too much land and they need to be accelerating that in their economy. Then it's a very interesting case because when you move to China mainland, it's a completely different scenario. Overall, there are 31. Some of these indicators are very, very low in the aspect of paying taxes, the issue of trading across borders, in comparison with China, Hong Kong. What you can see here, very interesting in China, is the issue that you can see that from 2019 to 2020, the improvement that they had been showing. For the last 3 years, this has been the tendency of China. China, even though that is not a recipient of lending money from the World Bank, they can buy the World Bank and they still have some cash in their pocket, is the issue that they launched these reforms to improve these indicators. For the last 3 years, they have been targeting improving these indicators, and you can see it here. You can see how they aggressively moving. They start 9 overall reforms at the national level, and that had been the product of these improvements in these indicators. Keep in mind, a country so big, an economy so complex like the Chinese economy, it's not easy for a government to start this reform, but it's paying back. They really want to reflect to the world that China is a place that you can do business, that is an easy place to do business, and they really think about that this is important for expansion because they want to really have that trade facilitation with other economies, and they want to show the openness to do business with them. Then you can see that even though that is not a lending process that they are doing this, they are doing that for other reasons, for them to show how easy it is to do business in their economy. Overall, in 2020, these are the economies that show a lot of improvement. What is interesting from this table here is that you can see that you have four Middle East countries: Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait. And then from those ones, you can see that there's big oil producers: Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Nigeria. When you think about it, it's the same situation. Countries that are not really recipients of borrowing money from the World Bank are really paying attention to these indicators. They really want to show, they really want to use this institutional framework to improve their services, not only to investors, but to their citizens itself. Then, like I said, it's a good institutional framework for a country to follow. Interesting cases here, like I mentioned, is China. You can see how aggressive they have been doing their reforms. You have countries like India that are super economic powers. And then from this list, probably you can think about that there's only 2 possible emerging economies: Togo and Tajikistan. The rest are super economic power, or they don't need the World Bank for the finance issues and so on. Then this is one of the factors that really you have to take into consideration: how important it is for you to understand these indicators. This is part of the information that you need to have when you're going to do a decision in business. Not only a simple decision of expansion your market, but any other type of relation that you want to do with another business. Like I said, the website of the World Bank have plenty of information, very detailed information, and it is very transparent in the issue of the methodology. To finalize, like I mentioned at the beginning, we serve the community and we provide services and products to the countries to help them to improve the doing business indicators. This is some of the products that we have been producing. Some of these products has already installed in 6 different countries, and we see a booming market for us in this area of improving the doing business indicators. Well, I want to thank everybody for your patience. I'm open to questions. And once again, I really want to give the thanks to FIU and our firms from Camacol for this opportunity. Doctor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Shows. This is an eye-opening. I mean, I was just listening to you, and I just want to keep listening, and I want more information. I mean, it's when I'm thinking about that you know, the challenges that we're facing currently, but in addition to that, the expectations of still remaining productive and expanding and growing, and how to really develop a winning business strategy. In addition to the prior economic indicators that we have been using, the leading, the lagging, what you mentioned at the beginning in one of the slides. And then we're also hearing about these high intensity indicators that are being produced by Google and all the high-tech companies. But this one really helps me from a very pragmatic way. I mean, I share with you, like at this point in time at FIU, as you know, we service 58,000 students. And currently we have about 483 international articulations, agreements with different universities around the globe. And yesterday I have a meeting where we were exploring the opportunity to expand in Vietnam. And when I'm listening to you is like, oh yes, I mean, this is going to help me to produce, and this is to the academic union as well, to produce that feasibility analysis that we do prior to investing in an expansion in a country. And this really, what you'll be sharing with you, and is very timely and is very important, not only to understand the shortcomings of the regular indicators that we use, but also to understand, you know, the pros and cons of this set of indicators, but also understanding how they can use it to develop these strategies. The first question that I have for you here is, in your prior slide, you were talking about some of the products. How does IOS help assist the countries in aligning, in ranking better in these indicators?
These indicators have a three-dimensional aspect. When you are trying to improve one of these indicators, you're trying to improve the services to your citizens. Example, if you, in a short period of time, can produce a construction permit, you are accelerating the construction industry in your country. Okay? Then the way that we see it is in a three-dimensional way. First, we go and we discuss with the country, what is your legal framework? What are the constraints that legally don't allow you to produce a permit in a short period of time? Some of the ones that we found is that in the country, electronic signature is not allowed. This means that I cannot receive applications electronically because electronic signature is not recognized by the law. Then we go and we analyze the legal framework. We have experts in our country, in our company, that dealing with these issues. And we go and tell the country, listen, these are the constraints legally that you will have. No matter how fantastic software system I will bring you, if you don't improve these constraints in your legal framework, we will be in the same place, you see? Then after that, we go and analyze the technology. how are you going to use our products adapted to that country, to the language, to the cultural factors, to the availability, to the constraints. Because in some countries, yes, some countries, no problem. Everybody can do an application online, but in other countries are not the case, you see. Then we need to adapt the technology to the reality of those countries. Yes, it had been simplified because mobile technology is here, and then it's available. The penetration of mobile technology in almost all the countries at 80–90%. And finally, we help to reorganize the administration of these registers, because sometimes you have extra workers and sometimes you need to turn around the workers. Workers cannot be the person that receives the paper and stamp it. Now you have to convert it and train them to be a customer service. You need to serve your citizens. You need to help them to resolve the problem, not to be the constraint saying, well, you forget to bring the signature, or I don't like the paper, or you need to bring me other paper. Then you have to educate those public servants to become client support service.
Excellent, excellent. Second question, does the World Bank DBI indicators used uh, to give loans? Is it used in the equation as the World Bank determines who gets financial aid?
The details of the lending requirements and the lending process of the World Bank is very complex, okay? It's not only that, there's other factors, the need of a country to grow or some kind of emergency or so on. I understand that, yes, this is one factor. How much weight that factor have, I'm not clear. I'm not really familiar with the lending process. But yes, they like to see that. They like to see a country that is making effort, a country that was successful in one indicators and come back and say, listen, can you help me with some finance to improve these other indicators? Then you're in a better position to negotiate with the World Bank than the countries that are really backing the issue and not really paying attention to these indicators.
Very interesting. Another question is, does the World Bank DBI provide a corruption index rating?
No, uh, unfortunately, they don't measure that. And also, corruption is very hard to measure, you see. There's a lot of, and it's sad, but it's the reality. There's a lot of factors behind that. There is a group called Transparency International, like you have Amnesty International, and they have something called the CPI, and they had been very good and very accountable in the issue of corruption perception index. That's what they do. They create this annual index and they measure all the countries under this annual. But no, they don't deal with that. At least they only deal with the issue how your reforms accelerated to be your economy more open, and also to try to move these economies from being a lender to being a participant, not a recipient of the bank.
Mr. Sos, can you expand a little more on your experience with Ryan? I mean, I remember you were consulting with them, and they're supposed to be I think at this point in time, a per capita, the richest country in the world, or something along those lines.
Yes, you see, I gave you two examples that the wealth and the standard of living of the country doesn't measure how good you are in those rankings. Okay, you can be a very wealthy economy, you can be an oil producer. Well, oil producers these days are poor, but you can be an oil producer and a gas producer, and still you have a very low rank in some of the indicators. I gave you the example of my client, where still have some low ranks in some of the indicators. I gave you the example of Saudi Arabia, which is really a very wealthy economy. But now they're paying attention to those ranks because they were very concerned that, example, in trading across border, they were at the level of other countries that they were in conflict, that they were poor. Then they were wondering why it's possible that I'm an oil producer, that I have this amount of wealth, and still have a rank of 140 import and export? Yes, because you probably are very good import exporting oil. But then if you want to import a car or a TV, it takes few weeks to do that. Then they came back, they analyzed that indicators, and they start realizing that the problem is that they always measure export with the oil and how effective you are exporting oil, which is very effective. Whatever they produce is going out immediately. But they never measure how will be the impact of a small business to bring raw material to produce, I don't know, some food product or some other product. Then yes, the indicators for them are becoming important, not because they're going to borrow from the World Bank, because there is a framework for them to improve some of the services and make their country more easy to do business.
Excellent. We have a comment from one of the participants when they are looking at, and especially now that we are a little more into behavioral economics and how the attitudes align to, the attitudes of the business community align to these indicators. I mean, are they willing to provide this information? And this is when the survey, the whatever methodology they use to collect the information from different indicators. No? So what's the general feeling that somebody from China will be as responsive as somebody from mainland China versus Hong Kong, for example? So they just making a comment that it would be good to understand the attitudes of the business community.
From the people that have been doing this type of surveys, what we find out is that they're very open. They see this like the opportunity to complain about services that government gives to their citizens. And also, some of the communities, the business community in some countries, have been see this like an opportunity to take control of some of these indicators. Example, in some countries in Latin America, one of the indicators is getting credit, which is the registration of mobile assets to use it as a collateral. A very good example is Colombia. That register of registered mobile assets is controlled not by the government. It's controlled by the business community, by the Chamber of Commerce, who control that registration. Of course, the legal framework, the enforcement is being done by the government, but the operational process is controlled by the private sectors. And they learned that. They learned when they were trying to improve that indicator, say, well, the problem is not the legal framework. The problem is not the enforcement. The problem is that the government don't have the capacity to accelerate this operation in a more effective way. Let me privatize the operation and let's leave the legal and the enforcement to the government. Yes, had been very positive in many places, and the business community don't feel bad to participate in that.
Super, super interesting, excellent presentation. One quick answer to another question is how do these indicators can students? I mean, you came to last semester to one of my classes, and the students were fascinated, and these were MBA students. But how do you think this set of indicators can assist a student to plan for their careers?
Okay, when you're going to make a business decision, Dr. Sumaneta, and you know that, you don't use one factor to make a decision. You see, you're going to spend your scholar and your university to Asia. Okay, it's not one factor. You use n numbers of factors. Then probably what I was trying to explain to those MBA students, which I remember the profile were top people, really, they were very good, cream of the cream people when I saw their profile. I even feel intimidated in that aspect. But the main issue is that I was trying to tell them that a business decision require a lot of pieces of information. And this is one of the pieces that they need to follow up. Not only an economic indicator, but this other one and some other pieces. Then this is part of the toolbox that they need to make decisions.
Excellent, excellent. I agree with you. The questions keep coming and the comments. I want to be respectful of your time, of the time of the attendees. At this point in time, any other comments or questions, we can address it independently via email. Are you okay with that?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
doctor, no problem. My email is here in the last slide. Also, I understand that the questions that are being posted in the chat are related with the person and the email of the person. Believe me,
Thank you.
everybody that spent time with me, I would spend time to answer. I think that they deserve that, you know, professional courtesy from my side.
Mr. Zeus, I cannot thank you enough for bringing your wisdom, your 20 years of career experience,
Thank
your
you.
professionalism, and your knowledge to this session, to the students, to the participants, to the FIU community. Thank you very much. I want to thank also Camacol and the Latin Chamber of Commerce for participating and helping us to put this together. I want to mention and the special thanks go to Mrs. Melissa Maldonado, Mrs. Dana Barata, Mrs. Sherima Smith, key members of my associate, my staff that help us to put this together. Also, I want to mention Maria Jose Gutierrez. I want to thank the Office of Engagement, the FIU Office of Engagement, for allowing us to borrow her so she can help us with the technology that we're using right now. And I have to tell you that our sessions are launch and learn, but there's also the Office of Engagement. They're putting together a series called Cafecitos. So we are combining all these webinars to assist, to get to the community, to keep assisting our businesses in preparation for the reactivation when time comes. Then also I want to say to you that at the end, don't forget to complete this, the survey. There is, after you log off from this webinar, as you know, when you do Zoom, there's going to be two hands showing up, and that's the survey about the technology. But then one will pop up right after, so you can provide us with your feedback, your input. I want to remind you also that we have another session next Thursday. It's going to be focusing on the Industrial Revolution 4.0 and its ecosystems. So it's going to be very interesting because it's going to show us how the presenter with Barletta, Mr. Jose Barletta, collaborate as well, that he's going to help us to understand how this industry 4.0, the company, the industries that are going to be thriving during the fourth industrial revolution. This presentation will be in Spanish, so I'll see you next Thursday. I'm going to leave it to the closing remarks to Mr. Sos. You want to share something with us before we close?
Yes, we live difficult times, but we live very interesting times. And I think that after all these difficult and constraints and problems and sad situation of many people dead, I think that there is a new beginning, and I think that this is a time for many of the new thinkers with the new blood to come with new ideas. The world is hungry for new ideas, and the world is hungry for innovative technology. Thank you. Be safe and be strong.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.